Salvete omnes, and welcome to this video that has nothing to do with grammar or vocabulary or translation or anything like that. I wanted to use this video to kind of take you back to something that we talked about in class, how Greek and Roman architecture have influenced us here in the United States. Greek and Latin languages exist in English. Without them, there would be no English. And the same could be true of our system of government, many of our laws, many of our customs, and many of our buildings. So I've added a lot of slides here that I didn't get to show in class. I hope you enjoy this. This here, as I've said before, is the Temple of Hephaestus, the god of fire, the god of the forge, the smith god. It later became known as the Temple of Theseus, a hero in Athens, and it is the most intact temple in Greece. This is a temple in Sicily, which remember was predominantly Greek for centuries, and this is in a place called Segesta. We don't know which god it was dedicated to because it's been totally stripped. Looters took everything, so there's nothing to identify it with. This one here, I could talk forever about it, is the Parthenon. As we said in class, there are no straight lines. It is still the subject of controversy because the British have a lot of the statues that they removed from it a few centuries ago. They still have them. They won't give them back. The Greeks want them back. Meanwhile, this temple is being restored with new marble, and it really is something to behold. This was a temple dedicated to the goddess Athena. And here we have an idea of what it might have looked like. You can see the statue of the goddess Athena on the left, which was all bronze and was later melted down to help make spearheads. Here is a reconstruction. This is a model of what the Parthenon probably looked like with all of its colors. There are many things that you can't see on the just inside the first row of columns, but they're way up. We'd need a ladder to get up there and see them. Those colorful sculptures that you see all around the top, most of those are what have been taken. When Christianity came along, the Parthenon was used for other things. Here, a church had been built inside of it, and it was used as a church for quite some time. Here, you can see the Parthenon with something sticking out of the middle of it that's called a minaret, which is something that is used around mosques. During the Muslim call to prayer, somebody gets up there and calls out, and it's time for everybody to pray. So the Parthenon was used as a church. It was also used as a mosque. And because it was used as a mosque, and in Islam, they don't want any statues or any idols, the British had no problem taking the statues down because the Ottoman Turks didn't want them anyway. This is the Parthenon in Nashville, Tennessee. It is a replica of the one in Athens. It had been built for the World's Fair. Up there in the gables, you can see the story that's being told there, which we talked about in class. Okay, now this one is not as perfect as the one in Athens. This one actually does have straight lines in it, but it's still a great place for us to go and visit if we can't get to Athens and we want to see what the Parthenon looked like. This is the Pantheon of Rome, and you'll see this style of architecture a lot in a little bit. We have the portico in front with the columns, nothing in the gables, nothing in that triangle there above the main entrance. But this leads to a magnificent interior. Pantheon, remember, means the place of all of the gods, and we can see where they had been worshipped. And this building is particularly known for its magnificent dome, which has an opening there at the top called an oculus, which means an eye. And if you look at these squares in the dome, you'll see them again very soon when we get to Washington, D.C. But this was a marvel of engineering that they were able to build a dome that could support all of that weight. A nod to the Parthenon again. Here is the Philadelphia Museum of Art. So if we can't get to Nashville, much less Greece, we can go to Philadelphia and see how they've recreated the front of the Parthenon. Just down the street from the Philadelphia Museum of Art is the Franklin Institute, which follows the architectural models of the Greeks. Okay, we have the Corinthian columns in front, the marble facade, the steps leading up, and many more things. Here we are at the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. You can see again the gables, the columns, the white facade, the dome. And here is what that dome looks like on the inside, and you can see the squares that comprise it. There's no oculus here, there's no opening at the top, but still you can see the influence of the Pantheon. Here is the Supreme Court building. It looks like it was lifted right out of Greece or Italy. Here is Thomas Jefferson's residence. This is called Monticello. And again, think back to the Pantheon. The columns in front, the porch that leads into a central room with a dome. And here's the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C. Look at the columns, look at the gables. There's a dome back there. The pattern should be familiar to us now. Here is the Lincoln Memorial. The skylight at the top is not Greek or Roman, but certainly the bottom section is right out of the architectural playbook of the classical buildings. Here's the Baltimore Museum of Art, and you've got those curling column capitals there that remind us of the curling horns of a ram. This building here is the National Archives, very similar to the other buildings. These are white, not that the originals were the Parthenon and those other buildings were painted, but still we have the steps leading up, the colonnade, the columns going around the building, the gable at the top. Here's the University of Columbia, columns out front, steps leading up to it, and as soon as you go inside, there's a dome. Here's the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. This is the first bank of the United States. This is in Philadelphia. Again, very familiar elements here, just used over and over again. And here is the New York Stock Exchange. So even on Wall Street, they couldn't resist the influence of Greece and Rome. And not far from there is Grand Central Station with, and I haven't even talked about these arches and keystones and so many of the familiar elements. They could have designed it any way they want to, but once again, they decided to go back to the classical style of architecture. This is Soldier Field in Chicago. This is where the Chicago Bears play. It's a very old stadium, and they even saw a reason to put columns here at a sporting arena. You can even see the architecture in places where you might not expect. This is the State House in Pierre, South Dakota. So even there, we see the columns, we see the stairs, we see the edicules, those little framed windows by the entrance, and of course the dome and the gable. And this is the State House of Massachusetts. And there's some very familiar elements here as well, especially the columns in the front and the golden dome at the top. Where have we seen that before? And this is the State House of Boise, Idaho. You probably wouldn't expect to find a lot of Greek and Roman architecture there, but there it is. And it looks like a miniature version of the Capitol building, right? And they have a great lawn going. Looks nice. And I'm not sure if you will recognize this place. This is the Capitol building in Trenton, using, again, many of the familiar elements with the columns out in front, the porch, the dome, the gold dome. Of course, that's not real gold. If you can't get to Trenton and you want to see an example a little closer to home, here is a church in Linwood, just a few minutes away from our school. And you can see many familiar elements mixed in with other ones, of course. And if you can't get to Linwood, Look no further than our great school. You walk in, you see columns, and there's a dome at the top. Okay, so even here, our school was built by people who had been influenced by Greek and Roman architecture. Well, that's it for this slideshow. I hope you found it interesting, and I hope you'll remember some of the buildings and look for them when you visit the cities they're in. That's it for today. Walete!